Holy crap, it's colder in here. Okay.
We both got our jackets on.
Yeah.
Whew. Gonna be able to make it through this?
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, and welcome to GeekWire. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop.
And I'm GeekWire co-founder John Cook.
We are coming to you from Seattle from a pretty frigid conference room. Our heating is off here in the days leading up to Christmas.
Seems typical. I know, it's cold in here.
It is. We're coming to you from Seattle, where we get to report each day on what's happening around us in business, technology, and innovation. What happens here matters everywhere. And every week on this show, we talk about some of the most interesting and important and monumental stories in the news. How's that for an adaptation?
That's great.
The
And
intro?
this year, and this time it is for the entire year,
Exactly.
monumental stories. So how are we gonna cover all this?
Well, what we did, and we've done this in the past, and it's worked pretty well, so we'll see how it goes this time. We both individually, without really comparing notes, although you sent me an email that I decided to ignore.
Good.
We looked at the top 100 stories for the year. In fact, I even shared one document with you that's the top.
Why did you ignore my email? Because I used AI to help analyze the top 100
because I wanted
stories?
to keep it fresh. I wanted us to surprise each other.
Okay.
I didn't want to see
There were just big
insights.
themes in there, no
Yes,
individual
yes.
stories.
So let's start our recap of this really pivotal year, I think, in technology, in Seattle, in the United States, and the world, with what for me was a conversation I had at the very beginning of the year that in hindsight, I didn't even realize it at the time, but in hindsight kind of framed for me everything that we were going to be experiencing for 2025 at a high level.
I'm very curious. I don't know what this is.
I don't know if you recall, but right after the first of the year in January, I got to travel down to Palm Desert.
Oh, okay. Now I know who it is.
Where
Yes.
I got to sit down for an hour, a full hour with Bill Gates. And we talked about Microsoft's 50th and his new book at the time. And at one point during the conversation, I asked him to compare the early days of the PC with what we're in now, the early years of AI. And so let's just listen to a little bit of what he had to say.
My way of describing that was that
I just want to say Gates, sort of the proto-nerd there with the voice cracking. It's like straight out of Revenge of the Nerds or Silicon Valley, Pirates of Silicon Valley.
That sounds like the real Bill Gates.
All right, so here we go. It is in fact the real Bill Gates, not an
Not an
AI.
AI.
No,
Okay.
okay, yes, I was there. I can vouch for it, if I'm real.
Yeah.
my way of describing that was that computing was becoming free. And because it was free, could we use it for word processing or spreadsheets or email or things like that? And I was and others, we were evangelizing this as this incredible tool and then connecting them together. Now, what's happening is intelligence is becoming free. And that's even more profound than computing becoming free. And so even I, was very taken at the demo of ChatGPT-4 that the OpenAI team did it at my house. I consider that as similar demos and similar to sitting at Xerox PARC with Charles Simonyi and seeing on the Alto, the original graphics interface. That kind of set the agenda of the software focus that Microsoft would have for the next several decades. And now this idea that AI can read and write and store knowledge is going to set kind of an industry agenda.
Intelligence is becoming free, and we're at this inflection point that is equal to or probably greater than what happened with the PC. And we are right in the middle of it. And I was looking at the top 100 stories, and every single one, almost every single one, is kind of like this subplot to that larger narrative that Bill Gates just explained there. I also love the fact that he can just casually drop the fact that the ChatGPT-4 demo was at his house.
Very cool, and very cool experience that you got to sit down with him and get his insights. He obviously has a interesting historical perspective on where we are, which I think is important.
It is. And I will say, I get wistful when I think about that interview, not for the interview itself, but for the 70-degree January weather
Yes, we could use that right now.
in Palm Desert.
Okay, let's keep this more rapid fire.
All right.
So that kind of set the tone.
Yes.
In terms of your year and AI being kind of everywhere.
Yes.
What else stood out to you from the top 100 stories on GeekWire? Actually, you sent me a list of 100, and then you sent me a list of 250.
Yes.
So I guess I should say the top 250 stories on GeekWire.
Best of times, worst of times.
Yeah,
I think
that stood out to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
What specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's AI investment and AI everywhere, and then it's a lot of layoffs and cutbacks, and then there's another kind of subplot to it as well in terms of there's some civic and public policy stories that are intertwined that are trying to kind of make sense of this, or at least trying to deal with the affordability issues and like some of the challenges that have arisen in society as a result of this technology boom coupled with where everything else is in the world. So that was another kind of undercurrent that stood out to me. But I think we should spend a little bit of time on both layoffs and the AI boom, because that does stand out in all the stories that you shared.
Completely. And to me, the entire dichotomy is captured in the vast spending that these companies are doing. And a lot of the stories about the billions that are being spent on AI infrastructure are very well read during the year. People want to know exactly what's going on. And then, as you said, the layoffs. And I think these two things are directly related. And it's this unexpected way that AI is having an impact on the workforce that we're seeing play out throughout the year. I think people assumed that AI was going to be taking jobs directly, and certainly there's some of that happening. But what we're really seeing happen, especially when you're talking about the Microsofts and the Amazons and maybe even the Googles of the world, is that they're spending so much on AI infrastructure that they have to almost pay a tribute to Wall Street in the form of these job reductions to show that they're being disciplined on operating expenses, even as they're just being, some might say, a little bit reckless in the spending that they're making on infrastructure. And I have to say, I've got another clip for you, John, that there was a quote that Satya Nadella had that I think was maybe the quote of the year. Well, actually, no, there's a few different quotes. Actually, I take that back. I take that back. There was actually a quote from a Seattle startup person that I want to play, that I want to talk about later, that was the quote of the year. But here's Satya Nadella talking to Andrew Ross Sorkin about the deal at the time between Oracle and SoftBank and OpenAI to spend vast sums on new AI infrastructure.
But when you look at that $100 billion commitment, $500 billion potential, I don't know if you saw Elon Musk took to Twitter and said, they don't have the money. The money doesn't exist, as if this is not really going to happen. What do you think of that?
Look, all I know is I'm good for my 80 billion.
I'm good for my 80 billion, says Satya. And his point there was, hey, I don't know what they're doing over there. You know, Larry Ellison and Sam Altman can do their thing independent of OpenAI's relationship with Microsoft. Microsoft was planning to spend at that point 80 billion, and they ended up spending even more on their own capital infrastructure. And at the same time, throughout the year, Microsoft, Amazon, and others are cutting back. And so that's where I'm getting to this best of times, worst of times narrative throughout the entire top 100.
Yeah, and there's a element here, and I think we picked up on some of these, not in direct stories that I can remember us doing, but there was a undercurrent of what this means to the rank and file technology worker at some of these larger companies, which, again, I'm not sure if we had a story on this, but we certainly picked up on through tips that came in, anecdotes, and maybe there is a deeper story to do here in terms of the discontent at many of these companies. And because I think there are a lot of people working in big tech, certainly that are really excited about the advances of AI and everything they can do, and they're transforming their jobs in the process. But for a lot of people, I think they're stressed. And they're stressed because they aren't sure how this is going to play out. They're getting a lot of directives from Satya and others to say, go all in on AI. And yet I don't think they know how to do it. I think there's no playbook. We're not sure how this is going to work out. And so they're getting a lot of pressure from above to utilize AI. At the same time, they're not really sure how to do it. And I mean, I think another big talker of the year was not our story, but the MIT report that showed that 95% of AI projects using generative AI have failed or have produced no return. And so you see this experimentation going on with maybe not that much payoff. And I think that causes additional stress for technology workers. So you couple the layoffs going on with these mandates to use AI where people aren't really quite sure how to do it. And it's a turbulent time in the workforce.
Bill Radke from KUOW had a fantastic opening monologue.
I loved it.
At the year in review.
Yes, we should link to this. It was fantastic.
We'll link to it. And if you're a baseball fan or a Mariners fan, there was one part of it that was especially amazing.
Well, my favorite part was Denny Blaine.
Yes, his singing. Yes. But he talked about the tech industry and this very subject.
So let's see. So 2025, that's what we're here for, right? What else happened besides sports and politics? Well, I mean, the tech industry had quite a year. Amazon ordered their workers back to the office. You must come back to the office. Are you here? Good. You're laid off. Not all of you, just the humans.
That was a fantastic opening monologue.
You know, he's a former stand-up comedian.
Yeah, you can tell. He's fantastic. And I thought that was a good one-liner. I don't know if we've seen the robots necessarily taking over jobs as he infers there, but I think there is a level of stress. I've talked to several people who've left the tech industry who just don't, it's too up in the air with how things are. It's hard to navigate right now, and they're happier because they've left. And so that's an interesting trend to keep an eye on into 2026 as these two worlds move apart. The massive capital spending, as you alluded to, with the advancement of AI, and then workers trying to figure out where they fit in this puzzle.
You know, I posted on LinkedIn after one of Satya Nadella's memos where he referenced this enigma of success, and he was basically trying to rationalize this dichotomy that we're talking about. And a former Microsoft employee posted on that LinkedIn thread, and his comments really stood out to me as I was looking back over the year. He said, quote, "The enigma of success is a polite way of describing the brutal reality of tech cycles. Surplus capital flows into moonshots while core teams quietly get restructured. It's restructuring, but not a new phenomenon." He saw firsthand how innovation at the frontier often coexists with cutting costs in the trenches. The challenge and opportunity for leadership is whether the bets actually compound into something durable or just become another slide deck for next year's reorg. That really stood out to me. That is getting to the sense of disillusionment that you're talking about.
Yeah, here was another one of the top 50 stories on GeekWire. Headline: Amazon layoffs reaction. Quote, "Thought I was a top performer, but guess I'm expendable."
That's right. That was somebody who was, if I recall correctly, rated in their prior review as a bar raiser, somebody who was really kind of excelling at Amazon. And, you know, Andy Jassy got into this as well. He was asked on an earnings call after Amazon made its latest round of layoffs whether this was related to AI, and he spoke to it in much different terms.
And then on your headcount question, the announcement that we made a few days ago was not really financially driven, and it's not even really AI driven. Not right now, at least. It really, it's culture. And if you grow as fast as we did for several years, you know, the size of businesses, the number of people, the number of locations, the types of businesses you're in, you end up with a lot more people than what you had before, and you end up with a lot more layers. And when that happens, you know, sometimes without realizing it, you can weaken the ownership of the people that you have who are doing the actual work and who own most of the two-way door decisions, the ones that should be made quickly and right at the front line, and it can lead to slowing you down. And as a leadership team, we are committed to operating like the world's largest startup, and that means removing layers, it means increasing the amount of ownership that people have, and it means inventing and moving quickly. And I don't know if there's ever been a time in the history of Amazon or maybe business in general with the technology transformation happening right now, where it's important to be lean, it's important to be flat, and it's important to move fast. And that's what we're going to do.
So with this, you've got these nuances at these different companies. It's tempting to paint the tech industry with a broad brush here, but I do think you've got different things going on. And I believe what Andy Jassy is saying there in terms of Amazon getting too bloated. You look at all the growth they had. Now, is the right way to do that, to order people back to work, hope that you get enough attrition that you don't have to do layoffs, and then when you don't get that attrition, make layoffs? I think that's leading into some of the cynicism that we're seeing. And I thought Bill Radke's joke was right on the nose in that way, in a good way. And I think the question for Amazon here is whether they can get back to that culture of innovation that really got them to where they are right now. And that's been a shorter cycle than Microsoft in some ways. I mean, it's not been 50 years for Amazon yet. And I think they're in a moment where 2026 is going to be pretty pivotal. I mean, are they going to be able to take all the work they've done in AI, take all the efficiencies that they've been trying to get in their organization in terms of decision making, and translate it into true market moving innovation to find that next pillar of their business, as Jeff Bezos used to say? And I think that's going to be a really interesting question to watch at Amazon.
So now the motto is not get big fast. It's get small and nimble faster.
Yeah.
And this is a big transition where it was growth at all costs. And these companies are now trying to become startups because they're seeing all the efficiencies you can get through AI. And they're terrified that, well, I guess OpenAI is a good example of somebody that comes out of the blue that just disrupts the existing models. And there's probably another 100 OpenAI style companies out there that are trying to just dismantle the existing technology titans that are out there. And so this idea of getting small and nimble is part of the reason why, going back to my earlier comments about workers, why they're so stressed is because it's a 180 turn, very quickly. And it's just like people aren't really built for that sort of radical change. You need to be setting people up for that. And I think this is what's causing a lot of that heartburn at a lot of companies and with a lot of technology workers.
All right, let's take a break. We haven't even talked about the top story of the year yet.
Or your top quote.
So let's do all of that when we come back. You're listening to GeekWire. It's our year in review, and we will be right back. All right, welcome back. It's Todd Bishop and John Cook. We are looking back on the past year of tech news here at the end of the year for the GeekWire podcast and reviewing the top 100 stories of the year. We're not listing them necessarily, but using them as a frame of reference to reflect on the past year. And John, the top story of the year was written...
Drum roll.
Sorry. Yes. Sound effects, please.
Yes.
Was written by our colleague Lisa Stifler. And it's one of those cases where it was a perfect storm of topic and headline and insight, I think. It is Coding is Dead. UW Computer Science Program rethinks curriculum for the AI era. And I think this gets to the... And
we should say for our non-Seattle area listeners, UW is University of Washington.
Not University of Wisconsin.
That's right.
So that headline was based on a quote from Magdalena Balazinska, the director of the University of Washington's Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering. She said, coding, or the translation of a precise design into software instructions, is dead. AI can do that. We have never graduated coders. We have always graduated software engineers. And that, to me, gets to another fundamental tension here, and that is just the way that all the things we've done, now maybe not at the UW, maybe they've always taught computer science there, but so much of the economy, especially in tech, was built on this notion of building up technical acumen and ensuring yourself a job by learning how to code, by going to coding schools and becoming a developer. I mean, it seemed like that was the new plastics, to go back to the classic movie, The Graduate, and the mantra there. I mean, coding was the new plastics. And that, in the course of, a year or two, has really been undercut. And I could see where that would be unsettling.
And there was the New York Times story on this very topic as it related to code.org, which is the organization led by Hadi Partovi, that was pushing a lot of high school kids and state legislatures to try to get coding more integrated into the educational system, and that came under attack as well. So I think, to your point earlier in the conversation, certainly a pivotal year in terms of the technology industry. I think the year that certainly AI, as we said, has been around for a long time, and certainly in 2024, we were writing a lot of stories about AI, but 2025, it was truly the topic at every lunch, every event, every business discussion going on, every earnings call going on. I mean, I think one thing, it'd be interesting to analyze the number of uses of AI in 2025 earnings call versus 2024 and 2023. I bet it's probably 5x.
So in the midst of all this, one of the things that we like to focus on is Seattle's competitiveness in the world. And to some extent, that discussion has become less relevant in the world of remote work. But one of the top stories actually was about another story. It was the coverage of the Wall Street Journal report. So we did a story about the Wall Street Journal report, and that story that we did was one of the top 100 for the year. And the original Wall Street Journal story was Seattle, tech boomtown, grapples with a future of fewer tech jobs. Getting to the heart of this issue, one of the people the Wall Street Journal quoted said, between 2012 and 2022, it was a great period until everything flipped. So I guess my question for you, John, in all of this is, as these companies try to become leaner, as the very nature of tech jobs change, what's happening to Seattle? And is this tech market going to be in a better place or a worse place long term because of this inflection point that we're seeing?
Well, I think it's changing, certainly. But there was just a report out from Atlas Van Lines this week, and it was reported in Axios. Did you see this?
No, I didn't. I love the source, though.
Okay, Atlas Van Lines? Yeah, yes. Well, what they were tracking was where people are moving. And interestingly, you look at states like California and Oregon and Arizona, and folks are still moving out of those places pretty rapidly. Washington State was still among the top 10 destinations that people were moving to. So that would lead me to believe that there's still opportunity here. There's still a reason why people want to live here. Now, do they all have to be and work in the tech industry? No. So I think that's big picture holistically. That's probably a good sign that there's still a demand for this state and people want to move here. So it's better than Louisiana, which I think was the state that had the biggest loss of people. I don't know how that relates to the larger tech industry. I think you still have massive anchor tenants here. You still have a venture capital infrastructure. You still have startups being born here. You still have a ton of smart people. You still have a massive research institution, although some of those funds are getting cut with the University of Washington. You have a big healthcare infrastructure where there's going to be radical transformation in terms of that industry and how technology and AI impacts it. I guess I'm not too worried about it.
It's such
who knows, but I've stopped, worrying about too much at this point.
It's such an interesting and complicated time to be covering technology, and to be covering technology from this place in particular. One of the other top stories of the year, I want to get back to the return to office stuff in just a second because I have more to say on that topic, but one of the other stories this year was actually related to one person's office. One of the top stories.
Wait, one person's?
One person's office. And,
I'm trying to think what this was.
Microsoft President Brad Smith reclaims his office after it was infiltrated by the protesters. And I'd bring that up only to add one more wrinkle to the complexity of the tech world these days. Microsoft saw repeated, really kind of extraordinary protests on its Redmond campus this year.
And at GeekWire events.
That's right. That's right.
They disrupted our event.
And this was the protesters from the group No Azure for Apartheid who were pressing Microsoft to cut its ties with the Israeli military, and actually had some victories over the year. You could dispute the cause of this, but after a Guardian report about Microsoft's technology being used in their surveillance of people in Gaza, then Microsoft ended its relationship with a specific part of the Israeli military related to some specific technologies. And so I bring all of this up just to get across the point that it is just a crazy time in the world. in the tech industry, and making sense of it all is tough sometimes to see whether we're headed toward a better or a worse place. But in terms of that sense of place, I think that is one thing that started to change a little bit over the past year. You had Amazon bringing employees back 5 days a week. You had Microsoft announce that it's going to be bringing employees back 3 days a week starting next year.
And a new campus.
And a new campus.
Also a top story this year.
That's where I was headed. So one of the stories, in fact, the concluding story in our Microsoft at 50 series, Rebooting Redmond, Microsoft's new campus reflects ongoing transformation and uncertain future. That was, I think, a story that might not have gotten as much of attention in the past, especially in the world of remote work. But that sense of place, I think, is more important now than perhaps it was 2 or 3 years ago to a lot of people. And so that was interesting.
But at the same time, I'm seeing more distributed companies and more people where they don't necessarily have a connection to place, and they are they're hybrid or remote first, especially in the startup ranks. As we talk to companies, it is kind of hard to pin down where these companies are actually based, and you have people all over.
Right. And so you end up asking, well, where's the CEO?
Yeah.
Where's the executive team?
Well, we just had this debate on a company. We were looking over our GeekWire 200 list, and there was a company that came in, and it was North Carolina. And I said, one of the things I look at is how do they refer to themselves in press releases that they put out? If they have a Durham, North Carolina dateline only, then they're maybe not a Seattle company. But if they have Seattle and Durham, North Carolina, then they are kind of acknowledging both places.
Isn't it interesting then in that context that one of the top stories of the year was about a company that insisted on employees being in the office?
Oh, glad you're bringing this one up. I
Yes.
know what this one is. Yeah.
So OpenAI acquired Statsig for $1.1 billion. It was kind of like an acquisition and a hiring. It was an acqui-hire in some ways. They named Vijay Raji, the CEO of Statsig, to a key technology leadership position in OpenAI at the same time. But Statsig is a company that we've covered in part because they're based in Bellevue, Washington, and they bring employees into the office 5 days a week. You cannot effectively live in the Bay Area or anywhere else other than the Seattle area and work for this company unless you have a jet to bring you in every day, which is obviously totally impractical.
Certainly one of the big success stories of the year, I would say, even though it was kind of an acqui-hire. I mean, they sold for $1.1 billion not too long after they were founded.
Well,
how much did they raise?
They raised, I don't know the total amount, but I know that their valuation just months before they were acquired for $1.1 billion was $1.1 billion.
Yeah. Well, they didn't get a massive premium on what their previous valuation was. But when you compare it to where they were 2 years prior, I'm sure they did quite well.
But the question in my mind, whenever I see an exit like this, goes back to something we've been talking about for 20 years. Why didn't this become the Seattle region's next tech giant? Why did they exit so soon? And I'm sure they had their reasons. And, a $1.1 billion payday is great for the investors, great for the executives, great for the employees, and, hats off to them. But when you look at the health of the region, could this have been the next, probably not the next Microsoft, it might have been too niche, but
you look like Anthropic or,
Could it have been a next sizable, substantial company that goes the route of public offering, private equity, what have you, that ends up employing thousands of people in the region? And that's what economic vitality is about.
But if you're the entrepreneurs and you're the investors,
trust me,
you're probably taking the deal, and you're probably getting a lot of pressure to take the deal.
Yes. What I'm saying here is very academic. I recognize that fact. And as I said, good for them. But at the same time, I don't know.
Plus, they probably got some OpenAI stock.
Yes. And Vijay Raji just had his first announcement in his role at OpenAI of a major product development. So, obviously they're continuing, and it seems to be a good situation.
Well, there's also been a lot of chatter as it relates to this acquisition of more mergers and acquisitions and IPOs coming down. And frankly, we just haven't seen a lot of it. Huh. There have been some small deals here and there. I'd even probably put Statsig in that bucket. It's probably on the larger size of it, but it's not like a $50 billion deal or an IPO that's happened. And so, again, I think just some fits and starts as it relates to the startup ecosystem where I don't even know of. I don't think there might have been an IPO out of Washington State in 2025, but I don't think there was a technology related IPO that I can pinpoint. I'm looking at our deals list right now, which everyone should know about, right? Go to geekwire.com and look in the nav bar and pull down lists. We track all the deals from going back many years, and they're small little base hits here and there, and nothing that really stands out as a blowout.
Even
deal.
the venture
Here's one.
capital deals.
There was an IPO. I apologize. Kestra Medical Technologies raises $202 million in IPO.
That should be. We should go back and do a story on IPOs of the year if there were more.
They went public in March of 2025. But going through the list, that's the only one I'm seeing. So that's kind of I don't know, maybe 2026 will be different. I'm sure a lot of people are hoping it is, because that's not a great outcome. No IPOs and several base hit mergers and acquisitions.
Well, I'm sure a lot of that has to do with some complex alchemy of interest rates and investing and regulation. I mean, there's so much that goes into whether or not you see IPOs and acquisitions. So who knows if that'll change with the interest rate environment
That's the
changing.
economic model for a lot of these companies.
Yes.
You know, that's how venture capital works.
Well,
that's how they get paid.
To your point, that economic model of deal making actually worked out on a very different level in 2025. And one of those deals led to our quote of the year.
Oh,
so let's get into that.
I can't wait to hear this.
Let's get into that when we come back. You're listening to GeekWire. And also, I'll have my feel-good moment of the year as well. So stick around. We've got some good stuff coming up around the corner. You're listening to GeekWire, and we'll be right back. All right, John, just tying all of this together. At the same time, we saw huge capital investments and layoffs. We also saw this trend of large tech companies paying huge sums.
Oh,
huge.
Now I know what the quote of the year is
for top AI talent. And especially you had Mark Zuckerberg at Meta going after these high-end AI engineers, developers, people who might have been at Stanford or the University of Washington or OpenAI or Anthropic, you know, the people who are really pushing the frontier. And one of those was Matt Dietke, and he was with the Seattle-based AI startup called Vercept. In fact, he was a co-founder. And at one point this year, he received an offer from Meta that he just couldn't refuse. It was hundreds of millions of dollars.
Certainly an offer you can't refuse.
Yes. I mean, I think he actually tried to turn them down. That's the scuttlebutt I heard. And it just kept getting even more difficult to refuse. And I was so impressed with the way that Kiana Asani, the CEO of Vercept, handled this situation. She handled it.
Yeah, and her co-founder who left to take this massive windfall at Meta.
Yes, and on social media, she posted what I think is the quote of the year.
It captured the intersection of AI, the boom in technology, compensation, the craziness that comes along with the tech industry in terms of the pay that some of these people make. I mean, it's just astronomical. And so it synthesized all of this. Startup culture versus big tech. There are dozens of storylines in this.
And she did it in such a level-headed way. And I don't think you would have necessarily seen this from other startup founders. So here it is, the quote of the year, in my opinion, from Kiana Asani about the departure of her colleague from Vercept. We look forward to joining Matt on his private island next year. I just loved that. I loved that one. That was right up there with I'm good for my 80 billion in terms of contender for quote of the year. Although I will say, quick sidelight into the geek life arena, John, before we get to my feel-good moment of the year. Ken Jennings on Jeopardy. Did you hear this one?
If the 1960s plan to replace this Seattle market with high-rises had succeeded, there might be no Starbucks today. Dan.
What is Pike's Place Market?
No. Sarah or Michelle? Sorry, Dan. We are sticklers in Seattle. It's Pike Place. No S. Back to you, Michelle.
Oh, struck down by the possessive.
Laying down the law.
Ken Jennings on Jeopardy.
Yes.
Seattleite through and through. Yeah, you could say that to 70% of the tourists that come through town. So there's one for the grammarians.
Is it Nordstrom's?
No, Costco's. Well, I have to say though, through all of this, I still look at the best of times aspect of the best of times, worst of times dichotomy, and for me, this was the year that AI truly did become real in terms of productivity and changing the workflow, the way that our team gets things done. And there was an interesting moment during the Microsoft annual meeting when Brad Smith from Microsoft brought up how this changed the way that they looked at a specific situation. And I thought it might be kind of instructive and enlightening just to listen to what he said.
This morning, I was in a meeting at 8 o'clock, and there was a topic that came up, and I said, we should really learn from this experience we had with a similar issue about 7 or 8 years ago. Let's see if we can remember that. And then I said, well, I'm going to ask the researcher agent and Copilot to produce a report. 15 minutes later, I actually had a 25-page report with 100 citations to information on the web, graphs, put it in a Word document, sent it around. And the other people in the meeting said, hey, can you share the prompt? Because we're all learning, even inside Microsoft every day, how to use AI more effectively. So there's just no substitute for that.
How many of those people actually read that report versus just having their AI agent summarize it?
Now the report that AI found and produced, can you have my AI summarize that 25-page report? Yes.
Well, it just underscores for me this notion that we're moving from individual productivity to team productivity, from people making use of AI in their daily work to organizations figuring it out. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is if these companies can actually start implementing effective AI agents, it goes from that, to go back to the paradigm of the PC, it goes from that desktop application to that true enterprise application and service. And that's where the Seattle region has traditionally excelled. So in some ways, we could be positioned here for something bigger.
And speaking about taking that in-depth report and writing it through AI, this is what I did in advance of this podcast is I took your top 250 stories report and I put it into AI and I said, summarize this for the GeekWire podcast, some key talking points. And what we've spent the most time talking about was actually the number one thing that ChatGPT suggested to me, which was number one storyline. After analyzing all those 250 stories was this: AI moves from wow to now.
Oh, jeez.
But anyway, nailed it.
That sounds like a bad.
And then here's
commercial.
here's what it suggested. The question was 2025 the year AI stopped being a tool and started becoming a coworker? You can debate what humans still uniquely own: judgment, creativity, leadership, and what's already slipping away. Those were the suggestions. For another time, Todd. I think this is a good place to leave the 2025 recap podcast.
Okay, so with that, may I share with you my feel-good moment of the year?
Oh, I thought that was it. I thought it was Brad Smith.
No, that wasn't feel-good. No, that wasn't feel-good.
I thought it was how he found efficiency and found this report from 7 years ago.
That's productivity. It's not,
I know.
It's not that's warm fuzzies.
That's good. Okay, what is your moment of the year?
It happened at the GeekWire Awards.
Oh.
The winner of Workplace of the Year was the company called Armoire, which does fashion rentals for women. And the CEO of that company and founder, Ambika Singh, stood up and really shared, I thought, one of the most heartfelt, non-AI.
It was a beautiful speech.
It was. So let's listen to a little bit of it here.
It is not a surprise to any of you that we are losing community outside of these walls in this country, but here, it feels alive and well. My oldest friend, the people who have supported me along the way, there's literally every table. There are so many of you. We believe in each other, and we've taken that to our teams and to our organizations, And I said to many of you this evening, this would be the award that would mean the most to me. And it's true, I'm a big crier, so we're gonna not try to go that direction. But the reason this means so much to me is because when I hang it up, I just wanna know that we added value into people's lives. And that's what this means. So thank you for that. I so appreciate it.
So for me, the reason that stood out is the fundamental question for me coming out of all of this, not just this year, but this transition we're going through, is are we going to be better off as humans and as a society, as a country, as companies, I guess, but those bigger questions to me are the most interesting. And I don't know what the answers are going to be. If you look at the way smartphones played out, I think you could argue that maybe we're not going to be better off, but is there a chance?
But social media certainly made us a better society.
Is there a chance that we could somehow be better people and have stronger connections because of these things that we're talking about? And
even
it's
if
probably
it's
a naive question.
Even if it doesn't happen, that it makes us better. I think what I like about those remarks is that it reminds you that you still should be human, and there are things that matter beyond just your company or the technology that you're building.
Yeah. All right, John. Well, thanks for the recap.
Enjoyed being here. Here's to 2026.
Absolutely. We will be back in the new year with a new episode of the GeekWire podcast. Thanks, everybody out there, for listening. Curt Milton edited this episode. Until next time, I'm Todd Bishop.
And I'm John Cook.
Thanks for listening to the GeekWire podcast.
Let's get out of here so I can feel my toes again.